Welcome to Rollwise, the show where we talk about all things tabletop role playing. Thank you for joining us. And of course, if you like what we do and you like hearing us talk about our table, what we learned in the tabletop role playing scene and how we're bettering ourselves in the hobby, don't forget to like, share with your friends, and possibly subscribe so you can hear more stories and more stuff that we chat about, and possibly some of our actual plays on Monday. Today, we're going to be talking about two topics, really. We thought we'd check in on the Alien Kickstarter. It's got its second edition. It's going super strong from what we can tell. And we thought we'd talk about a short little article that we saw by Charles Dunwoody on World, where it looks like he's got kind of a joyful GMing series. And he was talking about RPG success strategies. And we just kind of take a look at it, see what we like, see what we can offer from our own perspective and everything along those lines. So, are you guys ready to talk about Aliens Second Edition, the
Well, I
Kickstarter?
know, I know you are. I know you're very excited.
Me excited.
Well, I mean, you're the only one here that's backed it so far, so I hope so.
Fair enough.
I hope I
Well,
hope you weren't like, oh, I hate this game, and then you backed it.
just
Well, yeah,
putting shit
he's
in
the
the
only one of the
cart.
three of us that backed it, but there are 8,600 backers to the tune of 1.8 million.
Yeah, I mean, so like, what's really interesting about this is that first of all, Free League, I guess they've kickstarted about 40 different. Um, what is a Kickstarter called? Is that just what it's called? 40
Yeah, the
different.
Kickstarter are crowdfunding projects.
Projects. Yeah.
Oh, well, so they started 40 crowdfunding projects on Kickstarter at least, and so far it feels like um, Alien has the potential to be one of their biggest Kickstarters ever. From what I could tell, it looked like their Lord of the Rings stuff did really well, very much hit that 1 point some odd million dollars and everything like that. But this has still got 13 days to go. So as Brent said, I did pledge. I'm not ashamed to have pledged. But I also really like the Alien franchise, and I was actually thinking about it. I I was because we were talking about music as well, and one of my friends, I had one friend that apparently introduced me to GURPS, Nine Inch Nails, and Aliens. So I don't know if that makes him a good friend or a
I mean, it
bad
sounds about
influence.
right. It sounds on brand for that whole milieu for sure. But no, Aliens is a great franchise and it's a great property. I also think Free Leagues has done really well with
Mhm.
their licensed properties, and I think Aliens is one of them for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so when we look at like what the campaign is and everything like that, and so just so people are aware, the campaign, I mean, because we're not affiliated with Free League, nor do we have any kind of link to provide you that would credit us with anything. So just want to get that out there. This is just us looking forward with enthusiasm to the new edition when it comes out. Is that it's basically taking the original role-playing game, updating it with some revised rules and everything along those lines to make it more playable, more friendly. And I mean, the original game did win an Ennie when it came out, so it already had a solid foundation to work with. So I think this is one of those times in which I actually think that them creating a second edition that's still backwards compatible with all the content that they produced so far is actually 100% doable. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, no, Free League actually does a pretty good job. If they introduce a second edition, it usually isn't like all new rules. It's usually just
Mhm,
clarifications and making things a little bit easier to play, in my experience,
mhm,
from what I've seen. As opposed to sometimes it's like, oh, we have all this new stuff. We've done all these new things in the game. Whereas
mhm.
they kind of try to just like clarify and focus in the game a little bit better. And I think that's, ideally what you want from a second edition.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like they're updating the setting too. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, I mean they're adding a little bit more to it. I mean, so first and foremost, they're getting a whole bunch of new art. I'm not ashamed to say it. I did back the core rule book for the extra nice hardcover and everything like that. I can't wait till it goes on whatever shelf one of these are. But then they actually have they've got a new starter edition, so we can introduce people to a new starter adventure and everything like that. And there's actually something called the Rapture Protocol, which is it's a new cinematic scenario that they're putting out that is written by let me make sure I get this, Jonathan Hicks and Free League's Tomas Herenstam. So if I pronounce that wrong, I apologize. And they are kind of going back to the roots of the Alien franchise, remote, small crew, resupply run to Jeremiah 6, and it's the first installment of their upcoming Jeremiah saga. And I think based on what I've heard from other their other properties where they've actually had these type of campaign play, this is probably going to be an exciting saga, to play out kind of from start to finish.
Yeah, their campaigns are good usually. Across other games. Where does it say anywhere where it is in the like Alien timeline?
It does not,
I'm
but the good
curious
news
if
Uh,
it's
is,
I'm curious if it's new or if it's
no, I'm taking a look. It's Prometheus, I think,
oh, okay.
uh,
or no,
uh,
Romulus. I
Yeah,
think people
so
are into Alien
Romulus.
Romulus.
Yeah, so it's capitalizing on that
Yeah,
addition
because
too.
they've got a map of Jackson Star, the mining colony from
mm,
Romulus.
Yep,
yeah.
that's cool. That's cool.
And so, but the good news is we'll be able to get more information pretty much as soon as the Kickstarter ends, because all backers get early access to beta PDFs of the Evolved Edition core rulebook, the new starter set, and the Raptor protocol months ahead of the official release. And since these guys kind of work a little bit differently than other Kickstarters, the product comes relatively quickly, as evidenced by Electric State, is my opinion. That was fairly quick.
Yeah, mostly Free League it's more of a I mean, and people complain about this, but I don't mind it. It's mostly a pre-order campaign. It's mostly
Mhm.
making sure that they have money put away for the book
Yeah.
when it comes out.
And people are definitely interested. So all you people out there that like aliens, we hope you join in and jump on the bandwagon, as one could say.
And really those narrative style games, like if you enjoy the narrative space truckers style games, horror
Mhm.
games, it's a excellent space horror game.
Yeah. So I guess from there, I think uh, I think I'm interested, just in seeing if anybody in the audience, if they have any stories from what they've played with aliens, because we've mostly played the published stuff that they've had. We haven't created our own campaign or anything along those lines. So I'd be curious if anybody has played the game a lot from like a campaign play or really gotten like super deep into it. If you want to share your experience down in the comments, that would be really cool. I'd love to read and see what you guys have done and how it played out, because it was a real eye opener to play aliens as a, like a nice, like, as we had talked in a recent PvP episode, like everyone's kind of
Yeah,
against each other, but kind of not.
where players had cross purposes, obviously
Mhm.
cross purposes, because like in a lot of games, the adventurers are just adventuring together, and they all kind of are moving. They may have different goals, but they're all moving in the same direction.
Mhm.
In Aliens, it's definitely not the case. Like everybody has different goals, and they might be counterproductive to what somebody else wants.
Yeah,
Often are counterproductive to what somebody else wants.
and it's true. It's true. And I know these guys in one of our games, basically they were best friends and blew up the ship. So they blew it up together, holding hands, riding into the sky as a giant fireball.
No, we just happen to be together and have the
We
means to
solved
blow
a
up the ship.
problem.
Yeah, I solved the problem and inadvertently uh, helped Brent complete his secret goal.
And I'll tell you what, the prescription was not cowbell in this particular scenario. Nope, fire, lots of fire.
It was fire, yes.
The ship's probably still
So
out there in space burning.
could be, could be.
It
So yeah,
exploded real good.
and of course it comes just in time for the new FX series Aliens Earth, which they're teasing and being coy about being out in summer. What the preview looks really fun. I enjoyed the heck out of it, and I'm excited because I always, the worst part is I always get excited for a new Aliens movie, even Prometheus and whatever that second movie was after Prometheus. Um, was that Fassbender that was in both of those?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, such a waste. I hated. I hate to say that, but it seemed like it had so much potential.
I really honestly liked about 90% of the movie,
I
and
thought they
then
were right.
yeah, the
They were all right. They
some
were
of the
just
stuff,
different.
yeah, where they had the characters act against what they were, you know. Oh
Mhm.
yeah, no, a new biological substance. We certainly wouldn't need to have any sort of protocols in place to
PPE? What's that?
Yeah, yeah. It'd be so much harder to infect us if we wear that.
This movie wouldn't happen if we did everything by the book. So
Right.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
was the
there goes the book.
Covenant? It was Prometheus and then Covenant. Those are the two movies, right? Or was it the other way around?
I think
Prometheus was
Prometheus was
the
the first one.
first one.
Yeah. Then Aliens Covenant was the one after that. And yes, Michael Fassbender was the android in both of those.
David or whatever
Yeah.
he was. Yeah, and I think there was a lot of good acting in both of them. There were just some weird things that happened that I was like, okay, sure, it's an aliens
Well,
movie, I guess.
I mean, if we really want to get into it, it suffers from one of those problems that Hollywood has sometimes where like the nature of where the aliens come from isn't really something that needs to be told. It's just enough that they exist and they're
Mhm.
what they are. So
Just
it's
a
so
mystery.
going back and trying to tell that story seems a little bit weird.
Does anybody ever read the comic books? Was that like ever really discussed in the comic books that there be
I think
like
they just fought Predator a lot in the comic books.
in the comic books?
And
I,
Batman.
what?
Yeah,
I missed.
there was
I
some. There was some. Yeah,
Alien versus Batman, yeah. I think there was
uh,
even an Alien versus Predator versus Batman.
it's just,
Well, it was probably Batman versus Alien versus Predator, probably, but
Batman probably got top billing, but
yeah.
Alien's pretty big.
okay. So I won't be able to fib my way through this. I only read a couple of the comics, and I definitely didn't catch any of those ones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they existed. Yeah.
all right.
It
Well, on that
happens.
note, if you like the Alien RPG, um, get the Evolved Edition. Share your stories if you have any.
Yeah,
We'd just
we'd
like
like
to
to
hear
hear them.
about it. What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd like to hear them. Tell us why you love Alien. Tell us about the RPG.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. So next topic. Weird. So recently on N World, Charles Dunwoody put out a short little blurb, and it looks like it's part of a series that he is putting together that's called Joyful GMing. Um, I think that I hadn't actually seen any of these articles before. Had you guys seen anything prior to this?
No, I've never seen that.
No, I've
But
This
known
particular
that Charles
subject.
Dunwoody was writing some stuff. Like I've seen his name. I don't know
mhm,
if it's on posts or things like that, but I didn't realize he was regularly writing content.
yeah,
Especially not content like this.
yeah. So this is I did find a little blurb about uh, Mr. Dunwoody on N World that kind of like a meet the columnist and everything like that. Freelance writer, covers weekly print RPG print news, um, covers things like published tabletop RPGs and everything along those lines. And actually, when I was looking at some of the games that he's actually playing, and the GM's Leagues of Gothic Horror every other week, and plans to kick off a new Troika campaign. This interview was at the beginning of 2024, so I'm actually kind of curious if there was any updates as to how his Troika game was. Because Troika is a
Probably bonkers.
it was
That
it
would be
was
my assumption that it's probably a bonkers game.
it was probably bonkers. Looks like it also gets into a little bit of board games with some with Settlers of Catan and maybe some Talisman. I haven't touched Talisman in many years myself.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it seems like he's got has been in the world of RPGs, board games, and all that kind of stuff for quite some time. And as a writer, probably has interviewed a lot of interesting people, related to the industry and stuff like that. So it's interesting that he's putting kind of a joyful GM series together to kind of share that knowledge and all that kind of stuff. But this particular article was called RPG Success Strategies, and it's and I think when you say RPG success strategies, in this case, I would be like, oh, well, what do you mean RPG success strategies? But taken from the DM's perspective, it's like how are you successful as a DM to make your RPG successful? Um, how do you guys want to do this? Do you guys want to read through the article and kind of go through the highlights, or what do you think is
I
the
think we
best
should just
approach?
discuss the I think we should just discuss the article. I mean, because basically the basics of the article is he kind of sets you to task to define what you consider as successful for your GMing. When his basic assumptions are, you know, you get a get a group of people, you learn the game, you run a campaign of however length that you're looking for, and he kind of presents tactics, like strategies to keep those, to like make those things happen. What I think is interesting, really found interesting in the article, is he kind of presents strategies and ideas on how to get a gaming group, like
Mhm.
how to advertise and how to put things out there to get a gaming group started, which is something that I've never like thought of before, because I've always had, you know, friends to ask. So that was kind of
Mhm.
interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think that, when you look at, like, how people go, it's that I mean, if you have a group that you've been gaming with for 20 years and all that stuff, I mean, sure, you could have horror stories and everything like that, but it's just like when you're in that new place and you don't really have a group to play with, that can be tricky, trying out new groups.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it
I
really
know.
codifies things that you wind up doing as a GM,
Mhm,
which is a lot of just like people management, like way more
mhm,
people management than you think it's going to be, like scheduling and getting them together, and then you learning the rules, and then trying to get them to read the rules, and do their homework outside of the game, and then, you know, planning for the actual game. Like there's a lot of that sort of management mentality.
yeah.
And it,
So So I think that there's probably at least it's worthy to at least say that like what is tabletop RPG success is that the summary is that ongoing campaign and everything like that. But the strategy, you said advertise to find players. GM picks the night. The GM starts with one adventure. If the table does not fill up or repeat players do not start appearing, they need to try a new game system. Once regular players start to show up, find his table being full for future game nights, and then hone your tactics, chase strategy, and strive for leading his players to success. And then a GM who develops a reputation for achieving success will find that players want to be part of his ongoing campaigns.
yeah, one thing that's interesting is where it says GM starts with one adventure, but with the promise of another adventure. Like he goes so far as to say that,
Yeah.
which I think is interesting, because that's the like tie-in for other people. And we've kind of talked about it before. Like, do you leave people with cliffhangers or something like that? Well, leaving a cliffhanger or leaving a lead into the next game would be one of those ways to promise, you know, your adventure, to move the
Mhm.
adventures forward.
Yeah.
So,
I like stuff like that. I wanted to jump back for just a second because Mike jumped over my favorite part of the whole article,
Oh,
which was
sure,
in part of him measuring success.
sure.
He talked about having a regular cadence with a finale for each campaign.
mhm,
Mm,
If I had a nickel, and this isn't shots at anybody, this is how hard it is to get a
mhm,
campaign across the finish line. But I would have a lot of money if I had $1 for every campaign that I started that never finished. I'll be honest, I never even got close to finishing. Didn't where the group just fizzled out,
mhm,
where life interfered, where people decided they didn't like the game, or whatever reasons. I like having that goal in there. It's not. I don't think you have to finish it to be
mhm.
to be successful. Because sometimes we've been mired in campaigns and gone, wow, we've really lost our way. Do we really want to keep doing this? Do we want to try something
I think my definition of what a campaign is has changed a little bit.
new?
Like I consider a story arc, like finishing a campaign is a story arc. Like just finishing
Sure.
like
mhm,
something where the characters end, is I think what you should shoot for as far as like campaign is concerned.
I like that.
I think a lot of people consider a campaign like, I've been playing this game for 25 years and the character's level 905, and like
And
I
they're
just
still
don't
not at the end, man.
I just,
They're still
yeah,
not at the end.
I just don't think that's realistic in
No.
most cases anymore, especially anymore. But yeah, I think anytime you end a campaign or campaign arc, I think, you
mhm,
know. But yes, there are a lot of games that have just
Yeah.
fizzled
At
out.
least complete a story.
Yeah.
Like
mhm,
have some sort of a wrap up so that everybody can have closure, even if you decide to move on from those characters.
Well, and I think GM advice, I think have an end in mind. Like
Yeah.
I think a lot of people start a game with no end in mind, where it's just kind of like, oh, it'll be sandboxy and freeform, and then it just like, and like you kind of just never get to a point that you're looking for, a point where a story can end versus looking for the
mhm.
end of the story. I think is the way I would say it.
Yeah.
And
That's
I'm
fair.
and I'm guilty of that. I have done that many a time. Um, so yeah.
Well, and I think you do a good point. As a GM that is that has had some fragmented or abandoned games where things that maybe didn't go on track, or maybe there wasn't a satisfying story that was to be found. I think it really depends, kind of on your player and the type of group you're trying to engender, because I think there's really two camps, and I think the basis for this camp, which was kind of interesting, was that this is very much an old school mindset for me. As I was reading through it and everything like that, is that it felt very structured, and even reading through the comments, like kind of having him elaborate on some of his points, it felt like this is the recipe for and I kind of agree. I think another commenter said it, is that this is the recipe that makes getting a DM,
Mhm.
makes it hard for the DM to become a DM, really. So like if you look at the hobby as a whole of tabletop role playing and everything like that, and you as the DM have to schedule, you have to get the right people, you have to lead them to success, you have to make them into better players, you have to create the story, you have to create the end, you kind of focus on doing everything for them. That can be hard and challenging as a DM, who, when you're first time doing it, you're like, I just don't even know if I can tell a story, let alone fashion this
Well,
this
yeah, but
type
I
of
think
thing.
I think that's what this planning is for, is to help you figure
Mhm.
that stuff out and build strategies around doing that. Because
Right.
as a GM, that's what's going to happen.
Well, and what I was saying is that as opposed to some of those like play and find out type of games that happen, like Monster of the Week very much, has like a mystery and everything like that, but there's just kind of like a basic outline and everything. So I don't know how much that leans into this, where it's kind of more collaborative storytelling around the table rather than kind of the onus is on the DM
This
to.
doesn't really even say anything about like building the story, though. It says the GM has to learn the game, which he
Mm,
does. Which in Monster of the Week, for example, you have to learn those prompts and learn how to apply those prompts. This is basically strategies on how just to make a table, like how just to
mm,
get players together and just
Yeah.
how to keep them together. I think this is pretty basic as far as that's concerned, because this is all stuff that, like, I mean, when it says the GM picks the night and time every week that we're going to meet, like, that's pretty, like, that's not even making a story. That's just,
yeah,
hey
that's true.
guys, hey cats, let's all get together at the same time, and I'm going to try and herd you into this direction in time.
That's true, that's true. It just felt like there was kind of like it just, it's like the GM picks, the GM does this, the GM does that. It kind of like that's how I grew up as a GM, is that, as because I was kind of running the show, I was trying to, like, as you said, herd the cats and get
Well, i think
everybody
i
into
think
the
i
same
think you
thing.
do. I think it's daunting, but it's also rewarding because it's hard, I think. And I think
Mhm.
that's the part about GMing that people, like, you can have fun, and it will be fun, but there's going to be some work up front.
Right.
um
Yeah.
uh, Regardless of how narrative the game is and how collaborative you are. And if you have new players, don't expect it. You shouldn't expect it to be collaborative, because they're not going to know what to do to make it be collaborative at the beginning. Like, you're going to tell them to, okay, well, tell me a story or something like that effect, and they're going to just
Balk.
not.
They're gonna freeze.
This is not.
No, because I have.
Well, we have. I
Well,
mean, last week. I mean, this week we did in our home
that
table.
last night,
You,
that was
you want to tell
it
us
was
the
one of those
story
things
of
where I
this
was like,
fallen hero?
Right,
yeah.
like, ad libbing is hard, and asking players to do that, especially new players. I mean, we're experienced players, and we all, bulk at it sometimes. So having new players do it's going to be hard.
Mhm.
So you are going to, as a new GM, especially as a new GM, and probably for a new group, you're going to do more work. I think that's why I
Yeah.
think it's important to keep it fun and simple versus overthinking it. Like, have a strong
Yeah.
story arc in mind, just because they might not know how to do the things around the game.
I I guess I'm curious, because even in a smaller town, like, I wonder how well known, like how connected communities are and everything like that. Because I did notice that, they say a GM who develops a reputation for achieving success will find that players want to be part of their ongoing campaign. Um, I don't, I GM regularly, but I have a table that's kind of divorced from the local scene and everything like that, and we don't even play like, yeah, we don't play in
Well,
my
are you
local
down at
town
the
or
friendly
anything.
local game stores 3 times a week talking about your game?
Well, I think he just means the players that he already has. I don't think he means new players are going to think you're famous and come to your game. I think he just means a GM who develops a reputation for achieving success will find players want to be part of his ongoing campaigns. It just means that they'll stay.
Yeah,
You
I
won't
get
have
that.
that moment where it's like, oh, everybody, no one showed up this week. Like I think is
And
what kind
people
of his
talk to
point.
each other. Like
Mhm,
I've had friends that game that I've never personally gamed with. Like
mhm.
they've had their group, I've had my group, and there's never been any crossover. But there are
Mhm.
times where you sit and you tell war stories, for lack of a better term, of you know campaigns and things that went right and things that went wrong, and the hilarity that ensued from some of the stuff that went wrong.
Or if a friend drops out of a game, they might suggest they come join
Yeah,
your game or something like that. So
yeah.
Mhm.
Like, oh no, I heard you really have fun at your games.
yeah.
Like you must have a
Sure.
good group, or the GM must be good, or I mean, it's usually a group effort. It's usually not just on one person. I get what you're saying, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To provide all of the fun.
I heard your group is 14 people. I don't think I want to play in that game. Right,
Well,
Mike?
It's
I just
excellent. The
I
focus is
think it
almost
was
never on you, Brent.
where
That's true.
was the where did we hear that where it was just like, well, if they can't make it, you have to remember I did all this work, so you're out of my game if it's like,
It was that list of horrible GMing things. It was that did the
Yeah, it was the
rounds
bad GM. Yeah, it was the bad
mid
GM
last
takes.
year. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like the 44 rules of my game is that thing that did the
GMing
rounds.
crisis,
Yeah,
like
that went at like mid last year or the year before that we did,
I
and we did a few of them, and the guy was
yeah.
just like, "If you don't seem to be in the game, I'm leaving and I'm taking my book. If you were on my
what?
ride, I'm not taking you with me or whatever.
I
Or
thought
if
there
I
was
was your
another
ride."
one though too there. I thought there was another place where I had heard that on one of the, like I don't
Oh,
listen
maybe.
to a ton of
Well,
YouTubers, but I thought
Dungeon Craft has the thing about it where he's like, don't miss a game ever because it's just like work, is what he kind of said in one of his videos. That might be what you're thinking about.
maybe because it just struck me as like
He
if you
really went with
set up the
work.
game.
Well, he didn't say work. No, he didn't say
Okay.
work, but that's the
Well, I mean,
attitude
he
that he
could.
had.
That's
It's like
fine.
show up
It's
to
an
your
opinion.
game unless you're dead is basically kind of what, unless you're dead or dying, you should show up to your role playing
It's
game because it's your responsibility is kind of how he
well,
did it. And he's kind of right, but
you
like
got 6 or 7 or 8 people waiting on you.
life
Or
happens,
3 or 4. I don't
Mhm.
know. Whatever.
I
Yeah.
usually am of the opinion of if it's that if like something happens and the game is that important, we're just not we're just gonna move on without you. Like you will miss story elements that
Somehow
may
your character
impact you.
slept all through that entire
Yeah.
session.
Or you're just on somebody's back the entire time. You got
Yeah.
paralyzed by something.
You
And
stayed on your horse and you were safe the
you ate
entire
the
time.
wrong mushroom on the way out of camp and you're just paralyzed like a statue for the entire
You were
scene.
digging latrines for 3 days.
I mean,
Well,
yeah, so maybe that was it, but yeah, the actual wording of what you said was from that bad GM's list of
yeah.
if anybody's smoking pot at the game table, I'm leaving and no one's coming with me. The game's over for the night or whatever.
Well, and so I guess, so I get just to get back to the strategy and everything like that. I do have to say that this is a good strategy. The only thing that I would say is that maybe that isn't talked about is that if you are looking for a game and maybe you have the constraints of you can't find anything locally very easily, or you prefer to play online, Reddit has looking for group type deals.
Yeah,
Of course,
there's lots of groups that for that now
and
online.
and what I would say is you definitely open yourself up because anybody can be online.
Right. But
um,
online's also easy to leave.
yep,
you,
and
you
if
can
you
be like,
get them,
this is too much for me.
well,
Disconnect.
And exactly because when I first moved here in Southern California, I didn't have a gaming group. We weren't playing at the time, and I basically said I need a group. Or actually, we started playing around the same time as I found this other group. I found a group, and obviously, it was one of those things where we advertised. Oh, somebody was like, "Oh, we need somebody who can play," and then like everyone got there and was like, "I don't know if I'm really want a GM." And then I was like, well, I've GM before, I guess. And then
Well,
my
they suckered you
resumption
in.
of,
That's the oldest play in the book, Mike. You get new
well,
people and go, "Oh, our GM can make it." Anybody anybody got any experience?
yeah, well, maybe, but I have to say that it was a similar process to this, and so it works fairly well if
Mhm.
you can find the right group. Because I used online boards to find a group of people locally to go play in person. Because I'll be honest, I love you guys as much as I can, as friends can, but Discord and
Right. Not being in
Zoom
person,
calls.
it's definitely a different. It's a different. It's a different thing when it's in person,
Hmm.
for
No,
sure.
it's different. It works for some people and it doesn't work at
Yeah,
all for others. Like there's people who would never play online, and there's people that only
yeah,
play online.
and when you're advertising D&D, that usually tends to be the
Mhm.
easiest one to grab. I think if you were to try to advertise something a little bit more like esoteric, like, oh, does anybody want to play Cult Divinity Lost? Get your
No,
friends
you
around.
start with D&D and you work them into the weirder games. That's always been my strategy is, hey, do you guys want to play D&D? And D? And then you do a few sessions and then you kill everyone and then say, hey, I have a different game you guys might want to try.
Man, it's so weird how you got TPK'd right after I'm ready to run this other game.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that could work. I'd be curious because if the table does not fill up or repeat players do not start appearing, like I wonder if you guys have ever gone. I mean, maybe I should just try this one day. Is just go set up like a D&D night down at or a game night down at the local game store here and just see what happens. Little kid notwithstanding, I just have to get the wife's permission and see if I can't get people to come in and do some one shots or anything like that. It'd be
I've
weird.
thought about it, but I've also had bad experiences with people that I didn't know,
Hmm.
where there were some awkward experiences that I would never ever want to do again. So I've kind of been jaded towards my friend. I'm jaded towards just using my friends. Although, we did. I mean, we were gonna try that at MisCon, um, but then the GM didn't show up.
Yeah, we were. Do you think that new players are more of a problem in those situations, or more experienced players, or do you think it just runs the gamut?
I think it runs the gamut.
Okay,
Um, because I know there's been some experienced players that I played with that had a definite style to how they played. It was definitely not what my style was.
sure.
Hmm.
One of my friends, who gamed a lot when he was younger, he has some very interesting stories about people who were very not okay to play games with, for
Yeah.
various different proclivities. Um, and I
Okay.
did meet him on a message board at Jason. You guys know Jason. My buddy Jason. I met him on a message board at the university. Like he had there was a sign posted that said, "If you want to play role playing games, give us a call." And I emailed him, and
Yeah.
it worked out. But there were people that did not work out. He said so.
Well,
It
and I,
happens.
and I think this is like, as a GM, one of the things that you have to learn is who's good for the table. Because there's at one point in my life, I was kind of like, well, any game night is a good game night, just getting people together and do that. But I think if you get a group of strangers in there, as you said, you can have some odd experiences. And some of those may not be great experiences if you have
Right.
a group of strangers and you just clash, maybe personality wise. But I think to answer your question, Jeff, like I think it really depends on what the person is trying to get out of the role playing experience, because the horror stories and the type of people that I think, um, like I really struggle with this the most, especially in groups, is people that have kind of like, I hate to call it anything else, but like protagonist syndrome or main character syndrome, where they feel like their character should take a majority of the spotlight from everyone else, and they don't really understand how to share that equally.
Right.
If I may
Sure.
say, I mean, is that a fair way to put that?
Yeah.
Would you
No, it
guys?
it is. I would even say that people that aren't willing to be collaborative about the
Hmm.
about the about the whole process. I'm not saying don't be mainly concerned about yourself, because we all are, right, in our characters, but role playing's better, I think, when everybody's trying to,
Yeah.
go in a similar direction. It isn't the
Yeah.
same all the time, but you're all trying to further the plot and trying to further the story and work together.
And all have to have a similar approach to it. Like you can't have that one person that's like super serious in a game of players that aren't. Like it would be very hard if you had the one person that's always in character and always like pushing to be in character and stuff like that, and the rest of the table's more beer and pretzels type.
They're making
That
fart jokes.
that's hard. That can
No,
be
no,
hard.
it is hard. It's hard
Yeah.
when you want to get stuff done and there's
Hmm.
uh, you know, Heckle and Jekyll in the back, cracking jokes over everything. I realize I'm usually the joke guy. Like I get that,
I do. I'm bad at that too sometimes.
But sometimes I am trying to
Yeah.
like focus and lock in on what we're doing as a group.
And I don't think anybody's ever accused us of being too serious playing these games or anything like that. Oh
No.
man, it was really weird when Brent fell out of character. Has been said 0 times so far on any of my
That
plays.
is true.
So I guess as you look at it, this I mean it seems like a fairly basic way to start a gaming group and everything along those lines. Um, I'm curious as to any other final thoughts, or I mean, I guess the other thing is that did he mention and like kind of like the success is where you get to the epic finale. Do you guys have any final thoughts about that? Because you said we ran like adventures and everything like that with the promise of another adventure. I mean,
Well, yeah,
you said arcs.
I think once you finish the story arc, like that's the time where you're like, does everybody want to play another game in this world with these characters? But I
Mhm,
would consider that a separate. Like people say
Uh,
that's what a campaign is, but I would say that's a separate campaign. It's more serialized than like that, and you can do that. Like you can have ongoing
mhm.
campaigns if you have another story idea, and just build that into a story arc. That's what I would say in that case.
okay.
Yeah,
I do
I
want to mention my favorite part of the article though, really quick.
sure.
Yeah.
The only game that he says that he's ever had people not show up after running it was fourth edition Dungeons and Dragons, which I think is a hilarious thing to put into the article. But anyways, that's a tangent. Go ahead, guys.
I was going to say when you asked the question, Mike, I thought about our Pathfinder game because
Mhm,
I thought in that one, like when we would wrap up even minor plot points, there would be other plot hooks that we could grab
Mhm.
onto. Like, yes, there was an overarching one that we were supposed to ultimately be working on, but there
mhm.
was always something there for us to grab onto and investigate or find out more about.
Mhm.
And I thought that was good. It always, there always kind of was the promise of something else.
Yeah, so I would say like the Pathfinder game is a good example of what I'm saying. Is like the campaign is our characters. We got to the end where we found the guy and had the encounter with him and his daughter, and then the next story arc would be another campaign,
Mhm.
and all in an ongoing story.
Yeah. And I think that one, it's one of those ones where I think the hard part is that sometimes as a DM you're always writing for that next group. I don't think I've ever actually plotted like a level 1 to 20 as to use that language. I've never really plotted a 1 to 20 campaign to say, okay, well if you guys start
Sure.
this adventure, I promise you'll end up at
Well,
level 20.
I
That's
You
don't
that's
know.
too big a promise.
I don't think you just write I don't think it's hard to write RPG stories like that.
Mhm,
For one reason being the players. Like you don't know what the players are going to do. Um and by the beginning, and like you should have an end in mind, but the end may be very different
mhm,
than what was planned. Even if the players helped you plan like what the end may look like, what the end goal may look like, it might look very different from where you are. For example, I don't think you planned on all of us getting arrested at the end of at the end of the campaign, did you? The Pathfinder campaign.
well, no, but it was very easy because one of the players basically,
Well,
like,
I
went and
know.
confessed to a bunch of
But
crimes.
what I'm saying is the next chapter in that story is probably going to be a lot different than anything you might have planned, because you're
Yeah.
like, oh, he just confessed to everything that happened ever.
Yeah,
Um,
we didn't think it was going to turn into Prison Break, but
yeah, he just chunked it from Goonies, where he's like, and when I was 5, yeah, like so, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think that flexibility is what's there. The question is does it impact the overall destination, right? Like if you have your story arcs, but then you have your meta plot that you are creating and all that kind of stuff. And I guess I've never really had that meta plot fully realized, because I've always put something very far at the end of the campaigns. And that is just like, with most of our games being like, I would say the longevity is about 6 months to a year. Um,
Well, meta plots are different because, and that's why most role playing games don't have them anymore. Like if you look at
mhm,
meta plots, like a lot of games had meta plots built in,
mhm,
like earlier trad games, like you know uh werewolf, like most of the White Wolf games had the apocalypse theme
mhm,
as a meta plot, or stuff like that. And like it's very hard because all the stories the stories stop having flexibility. They all point towards that meta plot, and I think that's what you're trying
Mhm.
to avoid when you're writing a game yourself. Is
Yeah, and
because it
that's
starts to feel railroady. Because if you have that endpoint that's really tangible, it starts to feel like you're trying to point them to that, and that's exactly what you're trying to avoid doing.
well, and that but I think that on the meta plot, but also at the regular adventure, you still have that endpoint that you're trying to get to.
Right, you're trying to hit
Um,
points along a line. Yeah,
yeah, it's weird, and I think that's probably a conversation for a different episode, like about
Yeah.
campaign structure and everything along those lines. Because I would be curious to learn more about campaign structure that's more than just writing a singular story arc, but then being able to get that longevity to it. Because
I
the problem with that is that you
I
have to literally play forever, right?
I think if you're thinking about longevity in that sense, it would be story arcs, and then character goals would be the overarching meta plot, is what I
Mhm.
would think. Like my character wants to own a tavern. Plot. Oh, I have enough gold. I can do this now, and that would be like where you start to do the ending stuff. I think the ending stuff probably involves the characters more than like a set story arc.
Although I just thought about that 1 to 20 promise that you could make. The first goblin that you killed, it had a bag of holding with a gajillion gold in it, and there's one of those experience things where you get experience based on your wealth. So perfect. 1 to 20. Done. Um, you guys would probably just you wouldn't believe me if that was the case. You'd be like, "No, that's not real money. It's all
We
fake."
wouldn't take his pouch. We would take the goblin's sword, so we could ruin
And
the
so
economy of the region.
You can
I was
ruin the
thinking we would
economy.
befriend the goblin, and he would just screw with us for the rest of the campaign with his bag of holding.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fair enough.
Or
Fair enough.
there's the other one where somebody has a wand of disintegration that's actually a wand of teleportation that teleports them into
Mhm.
the bag of holding, and then the finale is all the people that we've defeated spilling out of the bag at the end of the game.
Yeah. Jeez. So with that, I'm curious, do you guys have any final thoughts about this? I mean, you mentioned the 4E jab.
Yeah,
Apparently
it was
everyone
mostly just a jab.
just a
Yeah.
reminder.
Yeah. My final thoughts are like, go out, look at the article, see what strategies you can use, because there's definitely some good stuff in there. It'll give you some ideas. Like I said, it's stuff that you'll wind up doing as a GM anyways.
Yep.
Mhm.
So it may, if you're an experienced GM, it may give you some ideas that you can use to improve kind of your organization, and give you some ideas of what you could do. Or if you're new, it'll give you a good idea of where to start. So
Yeah, because I think GMing it's fun. You know, I think if you and especially if you have a group of people that that it's not if you can develop a group of people where you have multiple GMs in that group, I think you can have a lot of fun yourself because then you get to play, you get to
yeah,
run, you get to share stories, you get to run the whole gamut.
yeah, it's fun and
And
rewarding being a
and
GM.
I think it's nice when you can get that kind of going because that's success. You each tell a story and you kind of feel more motivated to that story because when your turn is done, then maybe it's somebody else's turn and you can then work on your next campaign for the group when it's your turn in the rotation again, I
Yeah.
guess. So alrighty. Well, I think that's that. Um Jeff, do you want to share the social media stuff and then do the
Yeah.
whole wave thing?
You can find us on social media. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's at Rollwise. We also have an email, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking around as we ramble on about games like we love to do. Roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there, everybody.
Take care,
Thanks.
everyone.